Engaging employees has never been more important, more critical, more crucial to a company's success. And something actually really interesting is during this time, employee engagement has become an ever-increasing point of emphasis in companies' strategic plans, their initiatives, their visions. And that's why today we're going to talk about Employee Engagement 101. Learn how to really gain employee buy-in. We're really going to talk about this today as part of one of our LEAP weekly webinar series, where we're going to spend the next 4 sessions, 5 including today, talking a lot about employee engagement and its value, what it brings, some steps we can take to really start to implement it within our place, really gain that buy-in, that ownership from our employees. And if we are employees and we're not leaders, how to really be the employee that we're there to be the contribution to the company, to the organization, to the direction. And so I want to start very simply. A survey came out a long time ago from Gallup that said 85% of our employees are not engaged. 85%. And so what we find is that, number one, everyone wants to say, well, it's not my employees or it's not my team. But the truth is, 85% are not engaged, and that's a lot of our workforce that is not being their fullest contribution, not bringing their fullest ideas to the table. And think about, as an organization, what are we losing when we don't have employees being their best, fullest self? What kind of safety incidents are occurring? What kind of productivity are we losing? What kind of innovation and ideas are we missing? And that's what happens when we allow that to go on. Now, I want to share with you that I read an article just yesterday about engagement during COVID-19. And it was very, very interesting because it was a culmination of a few surveys that talked about that employee engagement is actually up right now in the midst of COVID-19. And the reason is because there's so much emphasis on employee well-being, satisfaction, things like that are going on at this moment. So companies are bending over backwards to make sure that they are really there for their employees during this very difficult time. And so I pulled a couple of the statistics here. And the first one I thought was interesting was it says 63% of the HR who responded to the survey thought their culture had improved since COVID-19 began. What an interesting thought, that we can have a pandemic that is so challenging on so many levels for so many people. And yet we can find a way to pull together as a community, as a culture within an organization, and support each other. Another one it said is that 59% of those HR saw that employee well-being was increased. So even in the midst of being isolated at home with the potential for health concerns, the benefits of a different type of work-life balance, being with your family all day, and though there are stressful moments of that, there's a lot of love and care that happens when you're with your family and good feelings. So 59% saw employee well-being go up. 79% of the companies that responded said they actually saw an increase or even just a neutral in their productivity. So we thought that when we worked from home, we'd lose productivity. And there are times where we are, places where we are, and people who are, and that's okay. It's a complete change. But as we transition into this and become more comfortable and learn routine for our children, for ourselves, they find that, hey, productivity is actually either going up or it's at least staying the same. Which begs to the question, what kind of employee engagement will we need as we have this social distancing, as we start to move to potentially having more people virtually working for us? Another one said 69% of the companies who were surveyed are actually currently investing in training. Now, why is that important? Because employee engagement is highly tied to growth opportunities, to advancement, to learning within the company. And so by even in the midst of a financial strain that happens because of this pandemic, people are still investing in training. Their training departments are putting out materials, as well as they're providing outside training that allows leaders to grow, managers to grow, employees to learn more skills. And so it's really about What are we doing to engage and develop our employees right now? And so we're going to talk about it in terms of very wide view. We're going to talk about it not in terms of COVID-19 or anything going on, but just in terms of employee engagement 101. We're going to really address 4 main areas. And what I want you to know is that those 4 main areas are going to be, each one is going to be one of the next weeks of our series here. And so the very first one will be next week's, where we're going to spend the whole time talking about it. But it's feedback loops. And that's just a fancy word for talking about giving and receiving feedback from our teams, from the people we work with, work for, clients, all of that. What do we do to create feedback loops? And what I have to say about this is oftentimes people see a feedback loop as when they have a group of employees who get together and are like their issue committee or something. You put some suggestions in a suggestion box, that committee reviews them and decides what we look at. Now, that's a type of feedback loop, but not quite what we're going to talk about today. Feedback loops come in all shapes, sizes, formalities, and systems. Yes, a suggestion box is a type of feedback loop. It's a little bit outdated, but it is a type of feedback loop. Still poses some things that are successful. A committee of people, where people bring them ideas, thoughts, concerns, problems in the workplace, and they look to what can we do about them. That is a form of feedback. But we want both the formal, things like that, right? Systems in place, performance reviews are feedback loops. But how effective are they? Are they effective for the employee? Are they effective for the employer? Do we all learn something from them? But there's also informal feedback loops. Ways to open the space so that your staff understands, hey, if they need something, my door is always open. It's the open door policy. And so when we look at feedback loops, my challenge to leaders today on this webinar is really sit down and reflect walking away from today. I want you to write down, how do you set up your feedback loops? What are some of the examples you have? What are ways that people are allowed to give you feedback openly? I want you to jot those down because I want you to be aware for yourself. How are we doing this? How am I making sure my people feel they have a space to be heard? Now, if you're an employee, maybe you're not a leader, and that's okay. When it comes to feedback loops, number one, reflect on what does your company provide you? What are the areas you have to voice your thoughts? And the reason you want to write this down is because you want to encourage yourself to say, hey, there is a committee, and I've got an idea, and I'm going to go talk to them. And the second thing I want you to reflect on is, how do I use my voice for the feedback loops? Like, how do I actually stand up and say something? Do I feel I have the ability to talk to my supervisor, my manager? And really think about that. The week after that, our second point here today, our second tip to talk about is to give employees a voice. That's not as easy as it always seems. There is a concept of psychological safety, and it comes from Amy Edmondson from her research on organizations, and it comes from the Fearless Organization as one of her books. That's beautiful. And what it talks about is that psychological safety is when we feel we can speak up, we can use our voice without fear of retribution, being attacked, being put down. We really feel psychologically safe in the environment to share. And so for our second point here, it's give employees a voice. What are we doing to empower their voice? From acknowledging their voice to really making sure that they have the point to make. So when we say that is like in a meeting, like about a project, as a leader, I should never give all my opinions and then ask the group what are their thoughts. I should really pull from the group. Find ways. I had a client talk to me about, hey, we're having a meeting and I have all these people that are going to be in the meeting all day, and I need more of their ideas, more of their opinions, especially from the different areas, because it's kind of cross training. And he said, problem is one guy always talks. And I said, okay, perfect. I said, get out a little pad of sticky notes, right? And just what I want you to do is use them to your advantage. Make people write their ideas down, right? Pass them around, put them up on a board, everyone share, right? Give people a time frame. Say, hey, you're going to take 3 minutes with a partner, come up with your, feedback on this. You get 60 seconds to share. What it does is you create systems that allow people to make sure their voice is heard. Even if it's as simple as write your ideas on a sticky note, hand them to me, and I'll stick them on a board. We don't have to say who said what. It's very powerful to give people a voice. And so look for areas that you can do that more and more. The third one here is something that I heard from a talk from the Department of Ethics from US Bank. And it was just really interesting because it was actually about psychological safety, but it took it a step farther. So when I said give employees a voice, that's the speak part of psychological safety. Give them an ability to really share, use their voice. Step 2 is our third one here, and that's listen and follow through. And I know that seems very simple. Listen and follow through seems very easy. But when we truly listen, that's a difficult skill. Oftentimes we're listening for what we want to hear. We're listening to say, heck no, you have no idea what you're talking about, right? But when we truly listen to hear someone, hear what they want to share with us, make them feel heard, not just give them a voice, but make them feel heard, that's powerful. And then follow through. You're never going to get employees expressing their ideas, concerns, frustrations, anything like that, if you're not following through with what you say. So when it comes to employee engagement, yes, number 2 was about giving them a voice because you feel engaged when you get to share your ideas, because not a high percentage of people feel that their ideas are met or heard or valued. But this third step, listen and follow through, is just as important, because the first time someone shares something with you and you don't follow up with them, they're never going to share it again. I had a client as part of a little team of about 60 people, and they had a really, really tough culture, really tough one. And the leader that was in place when we showed up had really low employee engagement scores. And most of the feedback was that they don't feel like their opinions are heard or valued. So that would be step 2. We facilitated a change in leadership through our time with them. And with this new leader in place, we had a little session with this person, and they were sharing with us that they have never felt so valued and heard. And we said, okay, tell us more. And they said, well, I shared with them that this was a concern of mine, and I wanted to look at how to address it. And she said, I took it to the leader. They said, they listened. They said, okay, here's what we're going to do to follow up. And she said, a week later, she came back to me and said, hey, I talked to this person and this person, and here's what happened. And here's why we can't make a change to this. But I want you to know how much I appreciate what you brought to me, because I learned a lot in this process. And if there's anything else I can do, I will keep looking into it. And what the client said to us was, it felt so good to know that I was heard and that someone acted on it. And she goes, I didn't even care that they fixed it, right? But that they went through the process of finding out why it's done this way and how it could be better, or, hey, no, this is the way it needs to be, and how empowered that felt. And so that's about listening and following through. And your fourth one here will be our last week in June, and that's about clarifying goals. And the reason we have this in employee engagement is I read a great book by Matthew Kelly called The Dream Manager. And it was all about the fact that we're motivated by dreams, by goals. And what comes from it is that they found that people were leaving a cleaning job, a commercial cleaning job, like very, very high turnover, things like that. And so they brought him in as a consultant to figure out what's going on. And so he sat down with people of all different levels of the company and wrote up essentially this concept of the dream manager. And there would be a position, and their whole goal was to interact with the men and women who were part of the crew who were doing the cleaning and the administrative side. And what that person was supposed to do is to just understand what the goals and dreams of the crew were. And what was so interesting in the book is that it laid out like personal goals and dreams. And that when they found out that, hey, all I want to do is I want to be able to buy a car. And what the administration learned was, oh my gosh, we can help support them in that. So they worked with some of their bankers to find certain lenders that would allow certain things. And they said, oh my gosh, we started to figure out that we were able to engage and motivate our employees by just helping them with things that were everyday life that they were dealing with that we didn't understand. So by having transportation, right? Helping them set up where their kids were going to go. Things like that, they were like, we didn't even know they were dealing with that. What clarifying goals is to us here, and we'll get into it, like I said, last week of June, it's all about how are we making sure that our company's vision is aligned with the individual's vision, the team's vision, because when we align those goals, we're clear, concise, we understand what we're going for, where that individual wants to grow. That's where we engage employees, because when we hit milestones, little wins along the way, it's all about, are our goals aligning with where we're going? Are we hitting those goals? Are we hitting them with our organization, with our teams, and with ourselves? And so that's why these 4 pieces are going to be touched on over the next 4 weeks. Feedback loops, so vitally important to giving people step 2, which is their voice. Empower them. If you're an employee, empower yourself. If you're a leader, empower them. 3, listen and follow through. Up until now, you may have not. You may have said, hey, I listened to them, they have a place to talk, but I don't often follow up. Not anymore. Follow up. Make sure you make notes for yourself. Go back to that person. Tell them what you found out. You may not find out the answer they want. Share with them that you went through the steps. And 4th and finally is clarifying goals, which I will tell you will love to be a part of. So I hope that you watch that one, get on with us, and share in that journey, because that is an incredible story from that book there. And what I want you to know is that, yes, a lot of the statistics say we are very highly not engaged, right? We talked at the beginning, 85% of employees are not engaged. But right now, we're focusing on excessive transparency to really boost employee engagement, give them a voice, make them feel heard, bring them to the table so that they're their fullest contribution. So remember, transparency is vital. It is so important to employee engagement. And all I encourage you to do is start beginning to think about, have the conversation with others, your team members, your employees, your coworkers, your leaders, no matter who it is, and talk more and more about employee engagement, and really talk to the people. How can we get this rolling? How can we improve this, get you more engaged, contributing, things like that to our workplace? And stay tuned, because in the next 4 videos, we're going to go over all 4 steps. Feedback loops, make sure people have a voice, listen and follow through, and clarifying goals. I look forward to seeing you there. And I thank you so much for being here on Employee Engagement 101, how to gain an employee's buy-in. Thank you.